किए एपी हाइन के इके का ऐसे भी ऐसी बारा काउन हाई। वो जो के पार बैठा हाई बाल की वो जो एपी के अंदार एपी के क्यों की टेरका हो। एयरवाइस मार्शल ज़ारा कान पीएफ की में नाम ई शहीन के नाम ऐसी जना टीएचे इके आयसे जो पर राज काट हाई। इके दिन वो शहीन हो। को यूएसआई के मेन इके डेओर एयरबेस पीएफ बेस मेन इके की एंगी किया। नाम सकीना बीबी। She wears a simple, faded and a covering her head. Cheap reading glasses sit on her nose, but behind them, her eyes are sharp and analytical and hold a fire that doesn't match her frail appearance. मैगर की एसआई कान वाली औरत और पाकिस्तान एयरफोर्स की एसबी ऐसी बारी के बीच की हो हाई। मेन काउन एसआई टी जो इके प्योर क्यों हिलाती। इसका अब हाई। The unforgiving sun beat down on the cracked tarmac of PF base. The air was thin and dry, carrying the distant scream of a fighter jet practicing maneuvers. For the soldiers stationed here, this base was less a fortress and more a gilded cage, surrounded by miles of impassable, rocky terrain. It was a place where secrets could be buried deep and forgotten. For the woman now known as Sakina Bibi, it was the perfect hunting ground. Her new uniform was a set of clothes, her weapon a mop and a bucket, and her mission was justice. She moved with a deliberate slowness, her back slightly hunched, a portrayal of a lifetime of hardship. She cleaned the cordons of the administrative block, her ears open, her eyes missing nothing. She saw the nervous glances the junior airmen exchange when a certain black SUV would pull up to the office of the base commandant, Group Captain Cheema. She noted the hushed, fearful silence that fell over the barracks whenever his name was mentioned. Cheema ruled PF base not with respect, but with a cold, unshakable authority that burdened on tyranny. Her gaze fell upon a young Sipo, Ali Rasa. And like the others, he wasn't just afraid. He was broken. There was a hollow look in his eyes, a grief that he tried to mask with duty. Zahra had read his file, and hundreds of others, before she shed her own identity. Ali Rasa's best friend, Sipo, had died here 3 months ago. The official report said it was a tragic training accident. But mother had written a letter to the air headquarters, a desperate plea, claiming her son had called her just a day before his death, whispering about convoys and things that weren't right. That letter had been buried, dismissed as the ramblings of a grieving mother. But it had found its way to Van Desk Air Vice Marshal Zahra Khan's desk. And for her, it was not the end of a file, it was the beginning of a war. She watched Ali now, as he stood guard, his knuckles white as he gripped his rifle. Group Captain Cheema walked past him, his uniform immaculate, his face a mask of arrogant indifference. He didn't even glance at the young soldier. But as Sakina Bibi mopped the floor nearby, she saw a flicker of pure hatred in Ali's eyes as he stared at Cheema's retreating back. It was a dangerous, unguarded emotion. And in that moment, Zahra knew. He wasn't just a grieving friend. He was a potential ally. Or a liability who could get them both killed. The days bled into weeks. Life on the base was a monotonous cycle of drills, maintenance, and oppressive silence. Sakina Bibi became a part of the background, a ghost in the machine. She was Aur Bibi to the young men, an invisible woman who cleaned up their messes. No one paid her any mind, which was her greatest advantage. She mapped the base's rhythms in her head. The scheduled patrols, the fuel inventory checks that never seemed to add up, and the unscheduled departures of unmarked supply trucks from Hangar 4, a hangar that was officially listed as under maintenance. She needed to get closer to Ali Rasa, but she had to be careful. One wrong move, one question, and the fragile cover she had built would shatter. Her opportunity came in an unexpected way. One evening, she was cleaning near the junior officers' mess when she saw Ali struggling with a faulty generator that powered the barracks backup light. He was getting frustrated, kicking the machine uselessly. Two of his superiors mocked him from a distance. O Ali, hai तीर की तरह ये generator भी fail हो गए hai, when of them left. Ali's face flushed with anger and humiliation. He was about to retort when Sakina bibi shuffled over, carrying her bucket. She peered at the machine with her tired eyes. Beta, she said, her voice raspy and gentle. Aise bhi aisi bara, aise bhi aisi hai. She pointed a trembling finger towards a small, grimy fuel filter cap that was slightly loose, almost unnoticeable. Ye. Kaise ke dekho. Hava eli hai. Ali looked at her, then at the filter. It seemed too simple. Annoyed, but with nothing to lose, he tightened the cap. He pulled the ignition cord one more time. The generator sputtered. And then roared to life, humming steadily. The other officers fell silent, surprised. Ali stared at the old woman, a look of disbelief on his face. How could a simple cleaner know about engine mechanics? He said, his voice barely a whisper. She just nodded, a faint, sad smile on her lips, and went back to her mopping. But the seed of curiosity had been planted. Ali started observing her more closely. He noticed how her eyes, despite the cheap glasses, never missed a detail. He saw how she would pause her work for a split second when Group Captain Cheema's black SUV drove past, her gaze following it with an intensity that was unnerving. He started to wonder who was this woman. A few days later, as Sakina was sweeping the dust outside the barracks, Ali approached her. He looked around nervously, making sure no one was watching. AP pali kahan, he asked, trying to sound casual. Zahra looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Beta, hum lagan ki main kahan e aur cab ki ko. Jahan du ki roti mil je, hamara hai. Her answer was perfect, the expected response of a destitute woman. But the way she said it, the calm, unwavering intelligence in her eyes told him otherwise. He took a leap of faith. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Mera dust THA. He choked on the name. वो THA के हैंगर 4 ऐसी के ओ जो ट्रक हाइन and में ये पानी. He stopped, his heart pounding in his chest. He had said too much. He had put his life, and hers, in her hands. Sakina bibi stopped sweeping. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the ground, but her entire body went still. After a long, tense silence, she spoke, her voice just as low. Keo mein har cheez ka rang kala hai nazar hai, beta. P. It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't a dismissal. It was a lesson. A command. It was the moment their silent alliance was forged. The cryptic advice, "U trust proof, not your eyes," echoed in Ali's mind. It was a soldier's creed, but hearing it from an old cleaner was jarring. It was a confirmation. She knew. And she was guiding him. He now had a purpose beyond just mourning his friend. He had to find that proof. He became Sakina's eyes and ears inside the barracks, while she remained the invisible observer in the open. She taught him, through brief, coded exchanges, how to watch without being seen, how to listen to conversations without appearing to. One night, Ali was on, patrolling the perimeter near Hangar 4. He saw the familiar headlights of the unmarked trucks approaching. But this time, he was prepared. Following Sakina's implied instructions, he didn't try to get close. Instead, he found a vantage point on a small ridge overlooking the hangar's rear entrance. Using a pair of binoculars, he watched. He saw the hangar door slide open just enough for the trucks to enter. He saw the base commandant, Group Captain Cheema, personally overseeing the loading. It wasn't supplies being loaded. It was small, heavy, wooden crates. And the men loading them were not in uniform. They were civilians with hard faces and watchful eyes. He relayed this information to Sakina the next morning, in a hushed whisper while she was cleaning the windows of the mess hall. He described the crates, the civilians, Cheema's presence. Sakina listened impassively, her face a mask of weary indifference. But her mind was racing. Civilians on a airbase, at night, and then the direct supervision of the base commandant. This was a brazen breach of every protocol. The corruption was deeper and more arrogant than she had imagined. Her chance to get closer to the truth came a week later. There was a major inspection scheduled by the regional command. The entire base was in a frenzy of cleaning and preparation. Sakina bibi, the diligent worker, volunteered to take on the extra duty of cleaning hangar 4, the van that was supposedly under maintenance. Her request was so humble, so eager to please, that the junior officer in charge granted it without a second thought. He'd said, "Thora extra Carlo, commandant." Armed with her mop and bucket, she entered the lion's den. The hangar was vast and cavernous. In one corner, there were a few dismantled pieces of old equipment, a convincing prop for the under maintenance history. But the air smelled faintly of something else, not oil or grease, but of freshly cut pine wood. And in the far corner, partially hidden under a large tarpaulin, she saw it. A single wooden crate, identical to the ones Ali had described, that had probably been overlooked in their haste. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had to see what was inside. She glanced around. The hangar was empty. Working quickly, her frail, trembling hands suddenly became steady and efficient. She used the metal hand of her mop to pry open one of the wooden planks. The sound of creaking wood was like a gunshot in the silent hangar. She peered inside. It wasn't rations or spare parts. It was packed with advanced drone components, guidance systems, thermal cameras, pieces of technology that were the lifeblood of the surveillance capabilities. They were being smuggled out, sold to the highest bidden terrorists, rival nations, anyone hadn't just stumbled upon smuggling. He had discovered treason. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. Her blood ran cold. She shoved the plank back into place and threw the tarp over the crate just as the hangar doors began to slide open. Group Captain Cheema walked in, his polished shoes clicking ominously on the concrete floor. He hadn't come alone. 2 armed guards were with him. His cold, calculating eyes swept the hangar and landed on her. "Kya kar ho?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Okay," she stammered, shrinking into herself, playing her part. Cheema's eyes narrowed. He walked slowly towards her, his gaze missing nothing. He stopped right in front of her, looking down at her hunched form. He then glanced at the corner, then back at her. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Ho," he said, the words dripping with sarcasm. "Kaach karn ke partahai." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her body trembling not from fear for herself, but from the chilling confirmation of his guilt. He knew she had seen something. The hunter was now being hunted. The encounter with Cheema changed everything. The game was no longer one of passive observation. It was a race against time. Zahra knew Cheema would not let a potential witness, no matter how humble, live for long. He would be watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. The pressure was immense. She had to get a message out, but every channel of communication from the base was monitored. A single misplaced phone call, a suspicious letter, and her cover would be blown, and Ali would be implicated. Meanwhile, Ali was growing more desperate. He could feel the tightening net. The atmosphere on the base had become even more toxic. The guards loyal to Cheema were everywhere, their eyes filled with suspicion. He knew his friend hadn't died in an accident. He had been silenced. And he feared he was next. His grief had now morphed into a burning desire for revenge, a dangerous emotion that could make him reckless. One evening, he came to Sakina. He found her behind the kitchens, washing her hands at an outdoor tap. He didn't speak. He just pressed a small diary into her hand. It was. He gave this to me a week before he died, Ali whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He told me if anything happened to him I should burn it. I couldn't. I think the proof you were talking about is in here. Zahra took the diary. Her hands, wrinkled and frail, closed around it. This was it. The smoking gun. But it was also a death sentence if found in their possession. Yedakar bara katra mool hai, Ali, she said, her voice heavy. Katra to any be mool peechay, he replied, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. Ye became high. Later that night, in the cramped, windowless closet that served as her quarters, Zahra read the diary. She used a tiny light, her body shielding it from any possible cracks in the door. Entries started off as a typical soldier's journal, complaints about the food, notes about his family, dreams of going home. But then the tone shifted. He wrote about the ghost trucks. He had logged their dates and times. He wrote about overhearing a conversation between Cheema and one of the civilian smugglers about a consignment for the other side of the mountains. Then came the final, terrifying entry, written in a shaky, rushed hand. They know I know. Ali, if you're reading this, don't trust the commandant. He's not one of us. He's a snake. I found one of the crates open. It's not just parts. It's our eyes, our ears. He's selling our country's soul. I have to report this. I have to. The entry ended there. Zahra closed the diary, a cold fury rising within her. Wasn't just murdered. He was executed for being a patriot. The diary was everything: a log, a witness statement, and a dying declaration. But it was just a book. She needed to get it into the right hands, outside the iron grip of PF base. Her mind, honed by decades of strategic planning, worked furiously. There was only one way. A opportunity. The next day, a weekly logistics flight was scheduled to arrive from the main command in. It was a milk run, a routine flight that was usually subject to less scrutiny than tactical transport. It was her only window. She had a contact on that flight crew, a loyal warrant officer she had personally mentored years ago, who knew nothing of her current situation but was instructed to look for a specific, innocuous signal. The plan was simple, yet fraught with peril. She would hide the diary in a garbage bag filled with refuse from the officer's mess, which was scheduled to be loaded onto the returning flight for disposal. She would place a single, specific broken teacup with a blue flower pattern from the mess hall's unique top of the refuse, the signal for her contact. But Cheema was a step ahead. He had become paranoid. The night before the flight, he announced a surprise security drill. The base was put on complete lockdown. All outgoing cargo, including the garbage, was to be subjected to a full manual search. He was hunting for a leak. And he had just slammed the door shut. The morning of the logistics flight arrived with a palpable sense of dread. The lockdown was still in effect. Armed guards, Cheema's personal hyenas, patrolled every corner. Ali found Sakina near the incinerators, her face grayer than the ash on the ground. "It's over," he said, his voice hollow with defeat. "They're searching everything. We can't get the diary out." Zahra looked at him. The frail, old woman persona seemed to melt away for a second, replaced by the hardened gaze of a general. "It's never over until the last soldier falls," she said, her voice low and still. "Get ready. We're changing the plan." She knew Cheema's trap wasn't just the search. He would be watching for who seemed most nervous, who tried to get near the cargo area. He was trying to flush them out. So, she decided to create a diversion so big, so chaotic, that it would draw every eye on the base, giving her the precious few minutes she needed. She handed Ali a small, heavy wrench she had pocketed from the U&N maintenance hangar. "The main water pump station, behind the primary fuel depot," she instructed, her words precise and rapid. "There is a primary pressure valve. I have loosened it. When hard strike with this wrench, and the entire pipeline will rupture. It will look like a catastrophic failure due to poor maintenance." Ali's eyes widened in understanding and fear. "But the fuel depot is spark could." "It won't," she cut him off. "The pumps are diesel, not petrol. The risk is manageable. The objective is chaos. Go. Now." As Ali ran, Zahra made her move. She picked up the fateful garbage bag containing the diary and the broken teacup and started walking slowly, deliberately, towards the cargo loading area. As she expected, two of Cheema's guards immediately stepped forward to intercept her. Group Captain Cheema himself was watching from the window of his office, a triumphant smirk on his face. He had found his leak. One of the guards yelled, grabbing her arm. "Ye kahan लीजिए ho." Sakina feigned terror, dropping the bag. "J.T." At that exact moment, a thunderous boom echoed across the base from the direction of the fuel depot. It wasn't an explosion, but the sound of a massive pipe busting and an extreme pressure. A second later, a powerful geyser of water erupted into the sky, flooding the area around the depot. Sirens began to wail. Shouts of panic filled the air. Main water line fat high. Fuel depot ke paas. Every head, including Cheema's and his guards, snapped towards the chaos. The threat of a flooded fuel depot, a potential catastrophe, was a far more immediate crisis than a suspicious old woman. In that split second of distraction, Zahra acted. She didn't run. She didn't panic. With the practiced ease of a train operative, she knelt, retrieved the diary from the garbage bag, and slipped it inside her. She left the bag, with the broken teacup still visible on top, lying on the ground. Her warrant officer contact, already on the tarmac and witnessing the chaos, saw the bag on the ground. The signal was incomplete. The package wasn't inside. His training kicked in. He knew something had gone wrong, and the plan had changed. His eyes scanned the area and met Zahra's for a fleeting second. She gave a barely perceptible nod towards the small service vehicle parked nearby, the van used by the ground crew. It was a message. The guards, their attention now divided, shoved her aside. "Heto AC," one of them snarled, before running towards the water pump station. Zahra stumbled, falling to the ground, playing the part of a frail woman caught in the confusion. But as she fell, she slid the diary underneath the driver's seat of the service vehicle. It was a desperate gamble. The vehicle was for the flight crew. It would be driven back onto the plane. Cheema, enraged that his perfect trap had been ruined by a burst pipe, stormed out of his office. He saw Sakina on the ground, the garbage bag empty of anything but trash. He saw the chaos. For a moment, he was sure he had her. But now doubt crept in. Was she just an old woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time? His perfect certainty was shattered, replaced by the frustrating mess of an emergency. He had lost control. And in that moment of chaos, the tiny, priceless diary began its journey home. The hours that followed were the most tense of Zahra's life. She went back to her duties, cleaning up the mud and water tracked into the cordons by the frantic soldiers, her face an unreadable mask of subservience. She was invisible again, but inside, her entire being was a knot of anxiety. Had the warrant officer understood her signal? Did he find the diary? Or was it still lying under the seat of a vehicle, waiting to be discovered by the wrong person? The logistics plane took off, its engines a roar of hope or despair. There was no way to know. Cheema, furious and paranoid, doubled the guards and initiated a new round of interrogations. Ali, who had successfully vanished into the chaos after his act of sabotage, was questioned. He played his part perfectly, a terrified young soldier who was just following orders during an emergency. He was dismissed, but he knew he was a marked man. Zahra waited. She cleaned. She prayed. For all 40 hours, there was nothing but a terrifying, suffocating silence from the outside world. Cheema grew more arrogant, believing he had weathered the storm. He cornered Sakina in a corridor once more. Hi achi hi, bibi, he sneered. Base mein har cheese toot hai. He smiled, a predator toying with its food. Har cheese ka hai. He was promising her death. But as he spoke, Zahra heard it. A sound that was not part of the base's normal rhythm. It was the faint, distant thumping of helicopters. Not the light reconnaissance choppers of the base, but the deep, powerful beat of transport helicopters. The sound grew louder, closer. Soldiers began to emerge from the barracks, pointing towards the sky. 3 large, dark green helicopters were approaching fast, not from the direction of the regional command, but from the west, from. They were not requesting permission to land, they were descending with grim purpose. They bore the insignia of the elite special service wing and the provost marshal's military place. Group Captain Cheema's face went white. The blood drained from it, his arrogance vanishing in an instant, replaced by raw, primal fear. He knew what this meant. He barked orders at his guards, secure my office. Jishi keo andar med dina. But it was too late. The helicopters landed on the main tarmac with disciplined precision. Ramps dropped, and dozens of commandos, clad in black, stormed out, securing the entire administrative block in seconds. They were led by a air commodore, a man who answered to no one but the highest echelons of air command. Cheema was apprehended as he tried to flee from a back exit of his office. He didn't resist. He simply crumbled, his authority, his power, his entire corrupt empire evaporating before his eyes. His network of loyalists was rounded up, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The reign of terror at PF base was over. The entire base was in a state of stunned silence as the corrupt officers were led away in handcuffs. The young soldiers, who had lived in fear for so long, watched with a sense of dawning liberation. In the middle of it all, the stern air commodore from the provost marshal's office walked over to the small, hunched figure of the cleaner, Sakina bibi, who was watching from the sidelines. The soldiers looked on, confused. Why was this officer approaching a mere cleaner? The air commodore stopped in front of her. He clicked his heels together and rendered the sharpest, most respectful salute of his career. Ma'am, he said, his voice ringing with authority and reverence. Air Vice Marshal Zahra Khan. Your mission is complete. We have the evidence. We have everything. A collective gasp went through the crowd of soldiers. Ali Rasa, standing nearby, felt his legs go weak. He stared at the old woman, Sakina bibi his. And for the first time, he truly saw her. He saw the straightness of her back as she slowly stood up to her full height. He saw the cheap glasses calm of, revealing eyes that held the wisdom and authority of a lifetime of command. The frail, servile woman was gone. In her place stood the Shaheen of the PF. Thank you, Commodore, Zahra said, her voice no longer raspy and weak, but clear, powerful, and accustomed to being obeyed. Ensure Sipo family is informed. He is to be posthumously awarded for his bravery. He was a true soldier of Pakistan. Her eyes then found Ali. She walked over to him. He was so stunned, he forgot to salute. He just stared, his mind reeling. You showed immense courage, Ali, she said softly. You honored your friend's memory. Your country is proud of you. Ali finally found his voice. Ma'am, I didn't know. Zahra placed a hand on his shoulder. It was no longer the trembling hand of an old woman, but the steady, reassuring hand of a commandant. Sometimes, she said, a faint, genuine smile gracing her lips, the most important battles are won by soldiers who don't wear a uniform. You just have to know who to trust. Later that week, a memorial was held for Sipo. It wasn't a quiet affair for a training accident. It was a ceremony, attended by Air Vice Marshal Zahra Khan herself, back in her immaculate uniform, her medals gleaming in the sun. She personally presented the posthumous medal to parents, who now understood their son's sacrifice had not been in vain. Justice had been served. Ike hui kaap ike dairi eor ike औरत का. ऐसी ike Air Vice Marshal eni के क्यों किया. Zahra Khan की ike अहम hai. के यूं के मेन, वार्डी मेन. सच के होन मेन हाई, ईपी हाई ये एनेहान. ये रैंक मेन हाई. ये सीपो हीरो के नाम हाई, इनिकी के ऐसे भी काच कर बन कार दिया. और ये ज़ारा कान राशनी की हाई, जो मेन भी आदाल का रास्ता हाई. Zahra, back in uniform, looks out over PF base, a new, honorable commandant by her side. She gives a reassuring nod to Ali Rasa, who stands still and proud. Hai ke iski, ke chand isai hila. Is main AJB aisai Shaheen hain, jo ke par hain. AP iske main kiya hain. Kiya main, ike pure corrupt system ke obeda hai. Comments main re zero e dine. एगार ये दिल क्यों हो, टू इसई एओर फैमिली के शेयर, वीडियो क्यों लाइक, एओर मेज़द एओर के चैनल क्यों सब्सक्राइब मैट. बेल आइकान क्यों ज़ेरो ए, टॉक एपी वीडियो मिस एने. सपोर्ट हाई ऐसे भी ऐसी बारी हाई.